We've all known gymnastics as a sport that leaves its audience in awe. While some people are entertained well enough just watching the athlete do flips and tricks on the floor, a lot of fans admire them because they know how much hard work the gymnasts put in to be that good. What they don't know, though, is the darker side, the years of abuse and trauma these gymnasts have to endure to their minds and bodies. First, we have the systematic abuse. We don't mean to sound cynical, but gymnastics has had a well-earned reputation for its widespread excesses. The sport was already referred to as legal child abuse 20 years ago, and it wasn't an exaggeration. Generations of gymnasts have spoken up over the years about how gymnastics is a machine for the destruction of the lives of young women, and this is evident in the titles of gymnastics autobiographies. They read like catalogs of crushed childhoods. Among the list are titles such as Off Balance, Break the Fall, What is a Girl Worth, Leden im Licht, and more. Even though the names, locations, and time periods are different, the stories are almost always identical when it comes to their traumatizing experiences. A Swiss gymnast named Ariella Kaislin used to fantasize about having a button she could press to end her life. U.S. gymnast Chloe Gilliand said she considered ending her life because it was easier than giving in to everyone else wanted her to be. Another U.S. gymnast, Jennifer Say, debated driving into oncoming traffic on her way to practice. None of these are isolated incidents. Nearly all of them have to do with the sport's effect on these gymnasts' mental health. A sport bordering on torture. Gymnastics checks every box on the list when it comes to traumatic experiences. Verbal abuse is something every single athlete has at some point experienced, and fat shaming by coaches is a persistent theme in the sport. Real estate and the animal kingdom are popular metaphors used by these coaches to insult their trainees' bodies. Balloon, brick house, fat cow, pig, and the list goes on. It doesn't come as a surprise when these coaches' obsession with weight and body image and the humiliation they put the gymnasts through results in eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia. Gymnasts often start training from a very young age and are isolated from the world beyond the sport, and parents who used to want the best for their child become blinded by ambition. Schools become deprioritized, and the hours and finances that should have been put into a good education end up being put into training instead. Then we have the abuse of coaches. In the Netherlands, a local Dutch newspaper, Noord-Hollands Dagblad, published several high-profile articles about gymnastics culture, in which anonymous gymnasts talked about what they had experienced during their careers. They had endured years of intimidation and humiliation, and how damaged they still are even after all the time that has passed. Stories of physical and verbal abuse surfaced that bordered on torture. Athletes talked about how their coaches would yell, hit, or spit in their faces for as much as a hair out of place. The series included an interview with one of those spitting, striking, shouting coaches in person, a former league coach named Jared Beltman. Beltman admitted nearly everything in the interview and offered an apology, saying that the conduct he exhibited couldn't be justified in any way and that he was deeply ashamed. The former coach went on to say that he never deliberately intended to hit, curse, hurt, or humiliate anyone, but it did happen. These children are taught to train and perform with broken bones, regardless of what mental headspace they might be in. With all of this naturally come the coping mechanisms, crying every day, self-harming, and hoping to get injured just to avoid training. Many athletes admitted to taking extra risks so they could increase the chance of injury. So why don't they leave? It's rare for athletes to leave their abusive coaches. This is partly because they love the sport, and partly because they and their families have invested so much in their careers, time-wise and financially. A lot of athletes live half their lives training with their coach, often even living with them, so leaving a coach ends up feeling like leaving their family, no matter how abusive. Former elite Dutch gymnast compared life in prison to gymnastics after she had served her sentence. Even if they overcome the mental barriers stopping them from leaving, a lot of gymnasts don't have many prospects beyond their sport. They have no safety nets, since most of their finances are invested in gymnastics, and getting an education is something that was nearly always neglected. Their entire lives have known nothing other than what their coaches have taught them, and so continue their oppressed lives. Now, how the cycle continues. A lot of gymnasts share the nightmarish stories that follow after their careers come to an end. Their memoirs cause a stir, the stir settles down, and then the cruelty resumes in a never-ending cycle that continues for years and years, resulting in a tradition of abuse that's passed down from one generation to the next. That answers the question of how the cruelty never ends. But then you might ask, why does the sport keep on being cruel to begin with? It's because abuse pays off. Or to put it a little differently, abuse is baked into the sport itself, and the quickest route to success in gymnastics means having to choose a direction in which some sort of abuse is virtually inevitable. No one wants to live like this. But if you love gymnastics, you've invested most of your life trying to excel at it, and you don't know anything else. What choices are you left with? A lot of coaches mold their athletes from a young age to prioritize nothing but the sport itself, so that all of their focus shifts to training. Dutch researcher Fruchtje Smits was told by a coach about how they are scared that the athletes might see things in life that might be more attractive and make them want to quit. He explained how the doors of the gym are closed and athletes are not allowed to participate in anything else. What if they find some other sport that they end up liking better? Or they have a boyfriend or girlfriend outside of sport and they don't want to do gymnastics anymore? The result of this is that many gymnasts lead depressing, monotonous, isolated lives, leading to psychological damage that persists long after their careers are over. A sport in which the superstars are children. Puberty is viewed as an inconvenient, career-ending illness in women's gymnastics. This can be traced back to the core of the problem. The sport is one of the few in which girls as young as 15 can win Olympic gold and become world champions. Making success for teenage girls is not just possible but probable. However, even if extreme youth isn't a requirement to win, it isn't an obstacle either. The thing is, you can win when you're 15 years old, and that's a problem because if it can be done, it will be done. The logic explains why coaches do the things they do, even if they find their own behavior deplorable. Being petite is a major advantage since smaller bodies rotate more easily, allowing them to do more tricks that yield more points within a shorter time frame. This means that as you grow taller, wider, rounder, and begin moving towards womanhood, you become less capable of performing the breathtaking skills it takes to win at that level. And from the coach's perspective, a younger athlete usually means a more obedient athlete. She may not be happy, but she practices, and that's all they need. Crudely put, if you have enough gymnasts and fit in enough hours of training before the age of 15 or 16, you can have your champion. No wonder why women's gymnastics is referred to as a race against puberty. Next, a blind eye is turned to scandals. The tendency to disbelieve women when they report sexual violence is deeply ingrained in the American society, and gymnastics is no exception to this. Gymnastics is a sport that demands no end of strength and stamina, and both of those qualities have been tested in a different way in recent years, as survivors of abuse and harassment have demanded greater accountability. At the age of 12, Kyle Stevens told her parents that she had been abused by gymnastics coach Larry Nassar, and they didn't believe her. The former sports medicine physician at Michigan State University and a doctor for USA Gymnastics managed to successfully convince her parents that she was lying about 6 years of abuse. The parents believed him so completely that they made Kyle Stevens apologize to him, and as a result, Stevens began to pull away from her family. In 2017, Nassar was sentenced to 40 to 175 years in prison for sexual abuse, in addition to a 60-year sentence for child pornography. After this, more than 150 survivors spoke out about how his abuse had affected them over the course of 7 days at his sentencing hearing before the Ingham County Circuit Court in Michigan. In gymnastics and in the world outside it, girls and young women are still too frequently seen as non-credible witnesses when they speak out about their own sexual abuse. The testimony of Stevens and other victims reveals just how disastrous the consequences of brushing off or dismissing women's accounts can be. That's a wrap for this video. See you in the next one.